Tonight we're gonna talk about the Tao a little bit. Um, we're gonna talk about the river. That is the Tao. We'll hear a little poetry and we'll have a little extra credit music as well. So looking forward to all of that. Thank you all for joining. It's so nice that we support each other. We're friends, and our friends extend out beyond our world. And the world is not in opposition to us. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. So I was talking to a friend the other day, and his father died a few months ago. And he was going through his effects through his old letters. And I guess he had written his wife, who was this friend's mother, a letter a week for 50 years. That's like 2,500 letters. It's a lot to go through. And I guess the father never threw anything out. And we talked a lot about that and about a relationship with his father and the deep connection that we have with our father and with our mother. And it made me think about, naturally, my relationship with my own father. He was born in 1919. He was a character. People loved to have him at a party because he always had a great story, and he was kind of a powerful guy. Yeah, and he fortunately threatened more often than used his physical power against his 6 kids and his wife, though sometimes it wasn't pretty. And maybe think about him. And when I think about him, for some reason, I always think about this koan. And it made me think about my changing relationship with him. It was only kind of a half joke, but it actually is kind of true, where our relations with the deceased improve as time goes on. Maybe we forget something, maybe we change, maybe in the bardo or beyond they change. I don't know what it is, but that was true of me too. He was always a smoker, and he had been smoking and drinking actually since he was 10 years old. And they had a ranch in Hayward, south of Oakland, before there were any houses there, and they lost the ranch. They grew flowers, many acres of flowers, and he grew up running horses and driving a tractor. In fact, his father never learned how to drive a tractor, and when they had a big argument, my father just left the tractor running in the field. His father had to deal with it. That was the state of mechanization in agriculture at that time. Yeah. He said, my father used to say, I always used to get along with my father as long as there was 100 miles between us. And that was probably true of he and I too. And I get along with him better now that there's some distance between us, at least for now. When he stopped drinking, he stopped smoking when he started to cough up blood, and he took up smoking a pipe. And this is his pipe. I keep it on my desk. I've never used it. I won't use it. I cleaned it out for him one time. He said, thank you, but you're not supposed to clean out the pipe. You know? That's kind of our relationship there. And he stopped drinking when he started urinating blood. And to his credit, he stopped in his mid-60s, and he lived a while longer, till he was 90. passed away at 90. But his mother's family was from the gold country. And the gold country in California is the foothills of the Sierra. And you know, I'm sure, about the 1849 gold rush, and really began in the early 1850s, where people came from all around the world seeking gold. And there was a lot of gold taken out of there. Millions and millions, maybe billions of dollars, I don't know. And we used to go up and visit my grandma up there in the gold country in San Andreas County, or San Andreas, which is still pretty poor country in that area. And we had Rudy, Uncle Rudy, who had a ranch, and Rudy and Frank, and we used to run around with their cattle out on the ranch and get chased as little kids by bulls and stuff like that. It was fun. So in the gold country, some of our relatives were prospectors, and they found a very large nugget. And I don't know how big it was. It seems to me now, in my recollection, that it was about that far across. And it was really gnarled. You know, if you've seen a nugget, they're kind of gnarled and beautiful, gorgeous. And they're not worn down yet by the water. So I don't know how they find them, but most of the gold, or placer as they call it, is taken as dust, you know, from the sand. And they used to shovel sand and wash water over it, and the sand would blow away. The water would blow the sand away, and would leave just little bits of gold. Then they would keep that and keep that and keep that, then take it to the assay office and get paid. And also, my father bought gold coins, and this is the only thing that I have with his writing on it. He never graduated from high school, and it's only in recent years. To be honest, I was always a little bit ashamed about that. I mean, not a lot, but it would have been nice, you know, if he graduated from college with a PhD. And I realized that maybe he had a learning disability, because he never really learned how to write. He wrote me one postcard, 3 lines one time, and that's it. And he'd write notes, very short note on the kitchen, you know, refrigerator. Spell my brother Matt's name M-A-T. Matthew is usually M-A-T-T. And he was a fighter too. When he got drunk, particularly, and he got drunk a lot. One time he was a newsreel photographer. Got thrown in jail sometimes because he would go across that yellow tape where they say don't go, and he'd say First Amendment rights. He'd go, and the police would arrest him. You know, some accident, some demonstration, all the Berkeley riots, many of the Oakland riots, and all that stuff. Sen Buck Joseph, that was his name. And he had tons of stories about those. But the gold coins and the gold nugget were stolen. Maybe a decade after, maybe 15 years after my grandma died, and he inherited those. And I never heard about that. There was no stories about the gold nugget or about gold coins, which he wrote about in I checked the price of gold, and the price of gold that he wrote from 1973. So the coin found in the river is sometimes lost in the river. The coin found in the river is sometimes lost in the river, and that's our lives. Sometimes we find the coin that's been lost, and sometimes we lose the coin that we had. We lose that treasure that we had. I had dreams of my father over the years. After he died, and he died alone. Um, my mother had her 6 children around her when she passed away. And I talked about that maybe a year or two ago. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful way to go. I mean, yeah, all of her children around, holding her hand, whispering in her ear. My father died. They were separated after 32 years of marriage and didn't talk for 20 years. But they died just down the hall from each other, a week apart, exactly a week apart. And we had just come from my father's funeral in San Andreas, in that gold country. Pretty bleak country, frankly, pretty dark, and or not dark, but dry, and vegetation. You know, it's before you get up in the mountains in the Sierras. It's I don't really think it pretty country, but people. Barry lives there, right? Barry lives in McCallamy Hill. I think McCallamy Hill is a little nicer than San Andreas, but so he was a Marine. He was a former Marine, and we got there to find 3 Marines there, and they played taps for him. The Marines will send anybody anywhere around the country to play taps for a former Marine at their funeral. I did not know that. And then we rushed home to see my mom, and my mom passed away as we were standing around her bed. So the first dream I had of my father was maybe a year or two after he passed away. And it was sort of like a bird's eye view of a park. And he was wandering around the park, sort of mumbling to himself and lost, you know, very unhappy, sort of in the way he died. And I was sorry for that. And then a few years later, it was a very strange dream. He died about 13 years ago, but a few years later, maybe 5 years after that, I was driving my kids were driving. They were old enough to drive. We were trading off, and I was just in the passenger seat, and I was nodding off, and I had a very vivid dream about my parents. They were sitting side by side, and they didn't say anything. They just had this very bright, great smiles. And it was really a wonderful dream. It was just, I was taking a nap and I had that dream. And I think it meant for me, it's just, you know, your girls who were headed off to college. And of course, I was worried about them leaving the house and going out on their own. It's a big deal. They would now be on their own. And I think they were saying, you know, your girls will be fine. And they were fine. And thank God they didn't go to Colby. They're accepted in northern Maine. If you're from California and you got to get to Colby, it's going to take you forever. So they went to California schools, which is nice. And the last dream I had about my father was only a couple months ago. And we were working together, building something. I think building something of wood. And he wasn't a craftsman per se, but he did like to tinker. He learned welding just to work with his hands more. And And our relationship was free and easy. It was okay. So I was finding that coin that had been lost in the river. You know, as I said, we're constantly losing and finding that coin. And the river is the river of our life. You could call it the Tao, but that's kind of a thing. It's kind of separate from our lives. You know, our lives are much wetter than that. They're much brighter. They're much more tangible than that. I think that's what this practice is to feel that wetness of life, that brightness of life, you know, that river, to feel what it's like to be in that river. Norman Maclean, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, Montana professor, wrote "The River Runs Through It," which expression is just love. And he says, all rivers go to a source. You know, they all merge. And a river runs through it, he said. A river runs through it. All rivers go to the sea. Yeah. Yeah. Not just swimming in the river, it's just being in the river. And the gold point, you know, in koans, we are that river and we are that gold coin, right? So it's easy to find gold coins. You know, the koan, in the sea of Ise, 10,000 feet down, lies a single stone. I wish to pick up that stone without getting wet. That's Sea of Ise. And it's funny because just picking up that stone, just something so simple as that, it's actually freeing because we don't have to explain it. We don't have to know what it's going to be. We don't have to know anything. We just pick up the stone. We just pick up the coin lost in the river. And now it's found in the river. I got one of my favorite poems, which you may have heard before. It's got a little glint of gold in it. A little bit of gold. Last night when I was sleeping, last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error that a spring was breaking out of my heart. I said, along with secret aqueduct, "O water, are you coming to me? Water of a new life that I have never drunk." I love that. Water of a new life that I've never drunk. Last night I was sleeping. I dreamt marvelous error that I had a beehive here inside my heart. And the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my old failures. The golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my own failures. Last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error that a fiery sun was giving light inside my heart. It was fiery because I felt warmth as from a hearth, and sun because it gave light and brought tears to my eyes. Last night I slept and dreamt marvelous error that it was God I had here inside of my heart. I love those golden bees. When I think of gold, I think of that poem. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Take me to the river. Yeah, Al Green. Well, thank you all for coming. Have a good night.